The Lord be with you.
And with your spirit.
A reading from the Holy Gospel according to John. In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. He was in the beginning with God. All things came into being through him, and without him not one thing came into being. What has come into being in him was life, and the life was the light of the human race. The light shines in the darkness, and the darkness did not overcome it. There was a man sent from God whose name was John. He came as a witness to testify to the light, so that all might believe through him. He himself was not the light, but he came to testify to the light. The true light, which enlightens everyone, was coming into the world. He was in the world, and the world came into being through him, yet the world did not know him. He came to what was his own, and his own people did not accept him. But to all who receive him, who believed in his name, he gave power to become children of God, who were born not of blood, or of the will of the flesh, or of the will of man, but of God. And the Word became flesh and lived among us, and we have seen his glory, the glory as of a Father's only begotten Son, full of grace and truth. John testified to him and cried out, "This was he of whom I said, 'He who comes after me ranks ahead of me, because he was before me.' From his fullness we have all received grace upon grace. The law indeed was given through Moses. Grace and truth came through Jesus Christ. No one has ever seen God. It is God, the only begotten Son, who is close to the Father's heart, who has made him known." The Gospel of the Lord. It was exactly a year ago today, in the town of Kourou in French Guiana, South America, when a rocket was launched, sending the James Webb Space Telescope into outer space, some 1 million miles from planet Earth, to orbit around the sun with its sun shield and infrared camera lenses that are able to capture different galaxies, star formation, and planetary systems that we've never been able to see with the naked human eye before. It's the most powerful telescope that we've ever produced as humankind. It has a capacity to take pictures 13.6 billion light years away. To give you an idea how far that is, one single light year is around 6 trillion miles long. That'll definitely get you to the other side of Chatham. The purpose of sending the telescope into outer space is to help us understand the origins of the creation of the universe, how fast the universe is expanding, and also different solar systems and planets that are out there, perhaps similar to planet Earth. What the Webb telescope launched last year showed us in its first pictures that are posted online on the internet beginning July 11th of this past summer are images that are simply spectacular. If you haven't had a chance to see them, the colors, the stars, it is simply amazing, God's creation that we're able to see. But what the telescope also teaches us is something very deep and fundamental to every human heart. It's the desire to remove distances around us. We don't do well as human beings with distance. We try to overcome it in so many different ways. We travel to different countries and places here in this world to get to know historical sites, to taste their food, and to get to know different cultures, and it brings the world closer together. We've traveled to the moon and sent out different satellites, and now this telescope to bring what is very far and distant closer to us through images and to help us understand the creation of the universe. We also, just in our relationship to other people, have always tried to remove distances. We've developed mail and courier systems for centuries. More recently, the telephone and in the last few years, the internet has brought us closer together and connected family and friends who previously would have been very distant and far away from one another and unable to communicate. We saw the great gift of some of these technologies in the last few years of the pandemic. This also, though, not just removes distances around us, but it also unlocks the mystery of every human life. I think one of the purposes, not just of the Webb telescope, but of our desire to eliminate distances, is that we hope by meeting other people and by staying close to our loved ones, that we understand a bit more about the reason and purpose of our own life as well, and what God's plan is for us. Well, the Feast of Christmas, each and every year, is God's response to these two fundamental desires of the human heart: to remove distances and also to understand the mystery of our own human life and life in this world. God closed the gap on that first Christmas day between heaven and earth, divinity and humanity, by God himself, the second person of the Trinity, Jesus, becoming one with us, becoming a little child, in a form that draws everybody closer to him. Just as we know when a newborn baby comes into the family, everybody wants to see pictures or get close to that little child. When a little child enters the room, our attention's immediately drawn towards it. God knew what he was doing, allowing him to come as a little child so that we could be drawn closer to him in a way that touches every heart. Even our manger scenes that decorate our homes and churches were a way that St. Francis of Assisi in the 13th century wanted to bring and close the gap between the distance of the first Christmas in Bethlehem to Christmases celebrated throughout the world. After a trip to the Holy Land and a pilgrimage in which Francis experienced Christmas in Bethlehem, he created his own live nativity scene back in Assisi in Italy so that people would feel that closeness to Jesus born for us and the city of Bethlehem, and close that gap of history and geography in our manger scenes. God could have appeared to us with his tremendous power that has created the trillions of stars and planetary systems and galaxies that we're still discovering. He could have come in the fullness of his divinity and glory and forced everybody to believe in him and turn their hearts towards him immediately with an array of display of light and of glory. But instead, he humbled himself, and he filled himself with grace and truth. And as we heard in the second reading, he chose to speak to us in a particular way that speaks to each and every person in all the world, so that all of us can see the glory of God, as we said in our responsorial psalm. He's spoken to us in many ways through the prophets, through creation, but now, as we were told from the letter of the Hebrews, he speaks to us through his Son. And this is the best way for us to understand who God is. A God who is not out to punish us or to wait for us to mess up, who's not some spy camera out in the sky just surveying us. He is one who desires closeness and friendship with us, and he's allowed us to understand the true image of who he is in the birth of Christ, the Word that has become flesh and lived among us. It helps us remove all of those false images of who we think God might be. Because I think many people are comfortable with a Jesus who is just a myth or a nice story or a wisdom figure. But we hear that Jesus is no just story or myth or just a plain wisdom figure amongst others. He is God who has become flesh, God who has taken on our human condition. And this unlocks the secret mystery of all of our lives too. Because our life has been connected and touched by God at every moment, our lives always have meaning and always have purpose, no matter what difficulties or obstacles we may be facing in this past year or in this Christmas season. The Feast of Christmas invites us not to look 13.6 billion light years away, but to look down at our manger scenes, to look down upon our hands or our tongues as we receive the body of Christ in Holy Communion, a God so powerful that he's able to make himself small so that we can receive him in the great sacrament of his love in the Eucharist, and how this transforms us, so that Christmas is not just a commemoration of a historical event that happened centuries ago in Bethlehem, but God's action in our lives, so that his light and the presence of Christ can be born through us in our own lives through faith. We've been given a tremendous gift on the day of our baptism, a gift way more powerful than the Webb telescope, and that's the gift of faith, hope, and charity. Powerful gifts that allow us to see meaning in our lives and how God is still at work in our world today. May this Christmas allow us to draw closer to Christ, for the whole universe is found in him.